between the United States and Iran have been red hot in recent weeks, and they might be about to get even hotter. There have been warning shots fired by U.S. ships against Iranian ones, and very close calls when Iranian drones have buzzed the U.S. military. President Trump will be called upon to certify that Iran is in compliance with the nuclear deal. Remember, he once termed it the worst deal ever. But twice now, as required under law, his administration has declared Iran in compliance. However, he personally has said he expects to declare Iran non-compliant when the next review is due. And a report in Foreign Policy says the president has put together a team of aides to pull together the intelligence so he can do just that. Earlier this week, presumably responding to these news reports, Iran's President Rouhani said his nation's nuclear program could be restarted within hours if new U.S. sanctions are imposed. My next guest was key to putting the sanctions into place that caused the Iran deal to happen. Former Treasury and CIA official David Cohen joins me now. David Cohen, pleasure to have you on.
Glad to be here.
So Donald Trump says that he is sure that Iran is not in compliance, but he wants to do a review. I don't understand this. How is this standard? Is this completely unprecedented for the president to kind of arrive at a conclusion first and then have a process?
Well, it's very disconcerting, and it stands the intelligence process on its head. The question that the president is asked to certify every 90 days under legislation that Congress enacted as part of the Iran nuclear deal is whether Iran is complying with its obligations under the deal, or whether it's in material breach of any of those obligations. That is obviously a political judgment, but undergirding that is an intelligence assessment. Our intelligence analysts who have access to all of our clandestine collection, access to what our allies around the world are collecting, and access to IAEA reports and other open source information are in the best position to make that assessment of whether Iran is complying with the nuclear deal. What the president has said is that in his judgment, Iran's not complying, and then he has asked a group in the White House to provide him with justification, with intelligence to support his preconceived notion that Iran is not complying with the nuclear deal. If our intelligence is degraded because it is politicized in the way that it looks like the president wants to do here, that undermines the utility of that intelligence all across the board, whether we're talking about North Korea, whether we're talking about counterterrorism, Venezuela, you name the international problem. We need others around the world to work with us. And one way we get others to work with us is by being able to use our intelligence and for people to believe that it's credible and reliable. If it's politicized, that credibility and reliability is undermined.
What would it mean for the U.S. to say that Iran is not complying in the context that the agency tasked with figuring this out internationally, the IAEA, has said it is complying?
Right. The problem is manifold. The first is if the United States determines that Iran is not complying, if the president refuses to certify Iranian compliance, it can go to the United Nations and seek to have the sanctions that were suspended snap back into place. But as a practical matter, you're not going to have the rest of the international community. You're not going to have our allies in Europe. You're certainly not going to have the Russians and the Chinese coming along with us to reimpose real pressure on the Iranians. So you'll have this fissure between the United States and essentially the rest of the world in trying to reinstate pressure on Iran.
And how do you think those other countries will react? Because the way I look at it, they will say, well, look, the IAEA tells us Iran is in compliance. You think they're not. You can put back whatever sanctions you want. That way we get to do business with Iran without any American firms to worry about and compete with us.
Right. It fundamentally won't work, right? Because if you don't have the other countries agreeing to adhere to these sanctions, they will have their own domestic laws that allow their businesses to do work with the Iranians, and American businesses will be disadvantaged, and there won't be any real pressure on Iran. On the other side of the coin, the Iranians, with the U.S. having pulled out of the deal, will feel that they are absolved from adhering to their commitments under the nuclear deal. So maybe they will begin to spin more centrifuges. Maybe they will begin to build up more enriched uranium. Everything that the deal is designed to prevent Iran from doing.
And it's important to point out that they do some things that the U.S. objects to and protests, and that are, in fact, antithetical to U.S. interests.
Absolutely.
Like testing missiles.
Right.
But they were never part of the deal. They were not disallowed under the deal from testing missiles.
That's right. That was not part of the nuclear deal. But it's terribly significant. The Iranians, continue to engage in behavior that is destabilizing the region. They continue to support terrorist activity. We continue to have sanctions in place addressing those activities. The nuclear deal was designed to address Iran's nuclear program. It wasn't designed to address everything about the Iranian regime that is troublesome. And we need to continue to address those other issues. But there's no reason to throw out the nuclear deal because we are dissatisfied with the Iranian behavior in other areas.
David Cohen, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Next on GPS, you don't hear much about Guam usually. Thanks to North Korea, though, it was atop the news recently. Now that threat